she's doing all the right things and is still tied with this former president.
You can say it. You can say it. Okay.
With this former president.
What? Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
This guy is full of lies. I mean, I just have to be very candid with you. You know, so in my career, from the time I got out of law school through most of my career as a prosecutor, I understood that the words that I spoke and what I did with those words would be the difference between whether somebody was charged with a crime or went to prison, maybe prison for life. When I was Attorney General, I was the top law enforcement officer of the biggest state in this country. And I was acutely aware that the words I spoke could be the difference between whether a corporation was in business or out of business, that the words I spoke could move markets. The idea that someone is not only so careless and irresponsible and reckless, but out and out lies to create fear and division in our country and thinks he should be president of the United States standing behind the seal of the president of the United States using the microphone that comes with that, and using that voice and those words in such an irresponsible, and that's mild, way. And this is why this election matters. Part of what we know has been happening in the last several years in our country is there's some powerful forces that are trying to divide us as Americans, would have us and cheer us on if we point fingers at one another.
America is known all throughout the world as occupied America. They call it occupied. We're being occupied by a criminal force. What they're doing to our country, they're destroying, they are ruining our country. We are being led by stupid people.
This guy is full of lies. I mean, I just have to be very candid with you.
Full of lies. Kamala Harris asked, where is the humanity? Where is the humanity? Donald Trump seems to have none, not a shred of humanity. Donald Trump said today that he believes that immigrants to this country are genetically inferior human beings. That is exactly what Adolf Hitler thought and said. Donald Trump doesn't seem to remember that he is a descendant of immigrants to this country, including his mother, who was an immigrant. 2 of the mothers of Donald Trump's children are immigrants. Donald Trump said today, quote, "We've got a lot of bad genes in our country right now." And again, that is almost word for word what Adolf Hitler was saying in the 1930s before he started World War II and before he started an organized extermination program of the Jewish people, in which Adolf Hitler's ambition was to execute every living Jewish person he could find anywhere in Europe. Because, among other things, he believed the bad genes theory that Donald Trump believes and spews in his poisonous madness and relentless stupidity. At 78 years old, we don't know how much longer the world will have to endure Donald Trump's Hitlerian ranting. But we should expect that for every year Donald Trump has left, he is going to get worse. Today's print edition of the New York Times carries an account of Donald Trump's cognitive decline and poisonous rantings under the headline, "Trump's speeches, increasingly angry and rambling, reignite the question of age." The Times reports, some of what he says is inexplicable, except to those who listen to him regularly and understand the shorthand. And he throws out assertions without any apparent regard for whether they are true or not. Lately, he has claimed that crowds Ms. Harris has drawn were not real, but the creation of artificial intelligence. Never mind the reporters and cameras on hand to record that. Talking on another occasion about how tough illegal immigrants are, he drifted off into a soliloquy about whether actors could portray them in a movie. They can't play the role. They'll bring in a big actor and you look and you say, look, he's got no muscle content. He's got no muscle. We need a little muscle. Then they bring in another one, but he's got a weak face. He looks weak. Still, he has a rather high regard for his own physique. I could have been sunbathing on the beach, he said at another point. You have never seen a body so beautiful, much better than Sleepy Joe, and I am deeply sorry for delivering that pornographic image of Donald Trump sunbathing on a beach. But I am just reading a New York Times report here. That's what that was. The Times also reports that Donald Trump, quote, vividly recounted how the audience at his climactic debate with Vice President Kamala Harris was on his side, except there was no audience. The debate was held in an empty studio. No one went crazy, as Mr. Trump put it, because no one was there. Donald Trump actually said the audience that wasn't there went crazy. Went crazy in a room where there was no audience. Years ago on Twitter, I asked the question, if Donald Trump gets dementia, how will we know? Now he's imagining an audience in a room where there was no audience. Are we there yet? He publicly fantasizes about having to choose between being eaten by sharks or being electrocuted by an electric boat, apparently thinking that only an electrically powered boat has batteries on it, and not knowing that every boat, except some very tiny sailboats, has a battery on it. In fact, the old yacht that Donald Trump once owned before he had to sell it in bankruptcy had gigantic batteries on it. And he didn't seem to worry then about being electrocuted by those batteries when he was 43 years old. Age has done a lot to Donald Trump. He now fears batteries on boats. The New York Times notes a semantic indicator of the aging brain of Donald Trump, reporting, proportionately, he uses 13% more all or nothing terms like always and never than he did 8 years ago, which some experts consider a sign of advancing age. Similarly, he uses 32% more negative words than positive words now, compared with 21% in 2016, which can be another indicator of cognitive change. And he uses swear words 69% more often than he did when he first ran, a trend that could reflect what experts call disinhibition. Joining us now to explain Donald Trump's disinhibition is clinical psychologist Mary Trump, Donald Trump's niece. She is the author of the new New York Times bestseller, Who Could Ever Love You? A Family Memoir. Mary Trump, let's begin on disinhibition. And one of the striking things about that final point where they're talking about Donald Trump's profanity, his public profanity as a presidential candidate, it is 100% higher than any other presidential candidate in history, since none of them have ever used profanity publicly the way Donald Trump does.
Yeah, Lawrence, I think there's a lot to talk about in this article, but that specific issue, to me, is an indication that Donald is feeling out of control. And also, as you mentioned, he is verbalizing in a way that other candidates for the presidency, other presidents never have, which is why I found at the beginning of this article, it was so disheartening for them to talk about the kinds of lapses that I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit more and that you've laid out, that because they happen so often, they no longer generate much attention. Well, that's the problem. Why? Why are they not generating more attention? I wanted to reread the article before coming on with you tonight, and it's not even on the front page of the digital edition of the New York Times anymore. There's no follow-up. There's no more explanation. There's no opinion pieces about it. This is a real problem because he is presenting us with very real problems that deserve the kind of serious speculation and analysis that has been given to other candidates' mental states in the past.
And his handlers, and perhaps Donald Trump himself, seem to think that he really now has to be shielded. He can't be exposed to another debate with Kamala Harris. He can't possibly be exposed on 60 Minutes tonight in their special programming, which they've been traditionally doing with presidential candidates for a while now.
Yeah, and I think, again, that points to the problematic framing of this piece. This is not a question of aging. This is a question of cognitive decline that may indeed be related to some kind of cognitive issues Donald is suffering from. It may be because of his decades-long, very serious psychiatric disorders that have gone undiagnosed and untreated. We don't know, because one thing this article also doesn't do is speak to experts on the topic. So we really need a broader discussion that in which we invite psychiatrists, psychologists, neurologists, neuropsychologists to help us understand what exactly is, and gerontologists. Well, we could throw some gerontologists in too, because there is so much at stake, and because there is so much going on. What is a function of normal aging? What is a function of something else? And a lot of what was discussed in this article does not seem to me to be part of normal aging. Unfortunately, although there was a laundry list of the problematic behaviors and speech patterns we've been seeing, no context was provided. Because of the American Psychiatric Association, a lot of mental health professionals have felt constrained, not just by the old Goldwater rule, but by the fact that in 2017, the APA expanded it beyond the point of absurdity. So psychiatrists can't even render opinions about what might be going on, even if the behavior of any candidate for the presidency might pose danger to the American people. Imagine not being able to have legal analysts on MSNBC if the ABA did something similar. That's what we need now. We need people to come on and analyze his speech patterns, his behaviors, his vision, his very dark vision for this country, and look at the motivations and the potential for catastrophe, because that is what we're talking about here.
When I hear these people talking about global warming, that's the global warming you have to worry about, not that the ocean's going to rise in 400 years an eighth of an inch, and you'll have more seafront property, right, if that happens. I said, is that good or bad? I said, isn't that a good thing? If I have a little property on the ocean, I have a little bit more property. I have a little bit more ocean.
Okay, every time we play this clip, we just got to stop for 1 second. Think about that give it 10 seconds of your brain power. If the oceans rise, do you have more beachfront property? Does that make sense? If the oceans rise, do you have more beachfront or you have less, right? Now, we've known for decades our planet is warming, that we would start seeing the brutal effects. But conservatives remain so deep in their denial, they're flailing around for anyone or anything else to blame. Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is now like a big mover and shaker in the Republican Party, is promoting a bizarre conspiracy theory about a mysterious they, you can imagine who that is, controlling the weather, suggesting that they are sending hurricanes to Republican areas to impact the election. Like someone is sitting at some computer somewhere pressing hurricane. And it's not just her. She's now being amplified by right-wing media and the Republican nominee himself.
Has the government figured out how to build a storm into a superstorm that will destroy everything in its path, and then how to aim it right for where they want to aim it? It just happens to miss South Florida, where all the Democrats live. Something strange is going on.
These are Trump counties. And don't tell me for a second that what we're not seeing is a massive government-pushed voter suppression operation.
You know, it's largely a Republican area. So some people say they did it for that reason. I don't even think they're that bad, but they probably, maybe they are.
They're sending the storms. They are sending the storms. Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, found a way to get in on it, too, blaming it on immigrants.
You have FEMA, which is there for disaster relief for American citizens after a terrible storm, being deployed repeatedly to deal with Kamala Harris's wide open border and the migrant invasion that it's caused. That lack of focus on their core mission, that distraction, and focusing instead on illegal immigrants, I guarantee that it has made the disaster response worse.
Okay, that's false. Both FEMA and the White House dispute those claims, saying the disaster relief fund is completely separate from other programs. But again, it's not really surprising this is the way the right wing and Republicans, even high-ranking ones, are reacting. The guy at the top of the ticket, right? It was never going to be the case they would see the real impacts of climate change, the carbon we put in the atmosphere, the heat that it's trapped, that ends up in the ocean, that fuels our storms. To see all that, which is, again, not hard to understand at all, after decades of denial, and be like, you know what? My bad. That's on us. We were wrong. But their behavior in the face of this dire consequence of this impending 1-2 punch for the Southeast should serve as a wake-up call to everyone stuck here in reality about the very real stakes of this election. Far-right kooks and conspiracy theories of all sorts have been part of our political landscape for a very long time now. But they're more powerful than they've ever been in my lifetime. They're on social media, they're on Fox, some now hold elected office, even at the very top. Now, whether they do it out of cynicism or self-delusion or like they've just got brainworms, they're all happy to promote outrageous disinformation about the libs and the globalists and immigrants and lots of other people who can't defend themselves. But then, every once in a while, their ceaseless lies present a practical problem to the Republican political establishment they serve. There was a moment that I think exemplified this back in November of 2020. After Joe Biden won, and Donald Trump started spinning lies about a rigged result, there was still, remember, a pair of critical Senate runoff elections in Georgia, which would determine party control of the Senate. And Ronna Romney McDaniel, the RNC chairwoman at the time, struggled to convince Georgia Republicans to vote because they falsely believed their votes wouldn't be counted.
Machines are switching the votes, and we go there in crazy numbers, and they should have won, but then there's still.
Yeah, we have to. We didn't see that in the audit, so we've got to just that evidence I haven't seen. So right. We'll wait and see on that.
How are we going to give money and work when it's already decided?
It's not decided. This is the key.
No.
It's not decided. If you lose your faith and you don't vote, people walk away. That will decide it.
Oh, really? Oh, now you don't like that disinformation, Ronna Romney McDaniel. Now you're standing up to tell them, no, it's not decided. It's not rigged. Now it's time to tell the truth that there will be bad consequences. Republicans lost both those elections, by the way. And so now here we are watching Hurricane Milton hitting Florida while still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene in the Southeast. And I keep thinking of that Ronna Romney McDaniel clip because you've got government officials of both parties and apolitical civil servants struggling to combat the rampant misinformation that far-right politicians, pundits, and influencers are spreading about the storms and disaster response. You're right. And of course, the ultimate example of this is the big lie circulating about FEMA.
Kamala spent all her FEMA money, billions of dollars, on housing for illegal migrants.
Housing assistance under FEMA, almost any reasonable person would think would be available for Americans who are displaced from their houses in a time of disaster, but that has been used on illegal immigrants.
How can we afford to give billions of dollars to illegal immigrants in this country, but we've got to go back to the well to provide disaster relief for our own citizens? That's a disgrace.
Look, they can't even take care of people in North Carolina from a hurricane because they're too busy spending our taxpayer dollars taking care of illegal aliens.
This is the Biden-Harris administration caught red-handed dedicating a massive amount of money that was supposed to be there for emergency relief for Americans in North Carolina, Georgia, and elsewhere to dispense to illegal immigrants, while hurricane-ravaged victims all over the country are left out to dry.
To be clear, it's not like one of these things where it's a matter of interpretation or a kernel of truth. It's an absolute lie. Stone cold lie. Started by Donald Trump, then spread by his running mate, his supporters on Capitol Hill, all the lackeys you saw there, Steve Scalise, the number 2 man in Congress, his supporters on Fox. The lie says that FEMA lacks the resources for disaster victims because it spent the cash on undocumented migrants. It is a lie that, as you just heard, was debunked by a Republican congressman from the affected area. So here are the facts. FEMA has enough funding in the short term to address immediate needs for both Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. And there is no funding connection between shelter for migrants and funding for disaster relief. There is no intermingling of funds between these two programs. That's not me saying it. It's the Republicans in charge of the House Appropriations Committee. In a fact sheet they shared yesterday with Chad Pergam, the congressional reporter for Fox, because they felt the urgent need to push back on a lie that is being spread by Fox News and by Donald Trump. A lie started by their candidate for President Donald Trump and amplified, as you see, by his campaign surrogates. Passed along on the social media site owned by the billionaire funding one of his super PACs. Republicans who suddenly see a conflict between the welfare of their constituents and the toxic effect of their party's propaganda, and also who don't want to fly back to Washington for an emergency session to fund FEMA when FEMA has money, now struggling to explain to their audiences that, well, up is up and down is down and water is wet and 2 + 2 = 4. And you could laugh at it when their disinformation was mainly just costing them votes in winnable elections like Georgia. But now it could cost lives in a massive, complex disaster recovery. It is enraging that it took a crisis of these proportions to convince politicians who have politicized everything that some government functions need to be above politics.
What? Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time. What? Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.